Welcome back to Foundations of Apologetics. This week we're going over evidence for the resurrection based on Gary Habermas' book on the resurrection. This is volume 1, titled Evidences. Great source. This is the volume 1 tome of his work. Here's volume 2. This one is Refutations. I will interact with that a little bit at the end. Number 3 is called Scholarly Perspectives. I don't have 4 yet, but God willing, soon I will. So, let's start this. Proof versus evidence. Proof belongs to mathematics or self. These are self-evident truths. Personally, how do I put it? There's two things. You hold a truth, something that's proven with a closed fist. There's almost nothing you can say that can destroy something that's proven. 2 + 2 = 4. And I exist. Those are closed-fisted proofs, in my opinion. While open-fisted things is everything else. These are things that run on evidence and reasonability. Everything else, including history. This is where it's a cumulative case, not a mathematical proof. Yes, here's the cumulative case. J. Warner Wallace talks about an evidence trail, where the evidence points decisively towards a conclusion. Some questions remain, but a reasonable verdict can still be rendered. He talks about, in a court case, he's going to lay out these stepping stones of evidence. But that last step of conviction, that's where faith comes in, even for us as Christians. We can see all these stepping stones that lead us to Christ. But there's always that last step of faith with everything other than, again, I exist and mathematics. Everything else requires that step of faith at the end. So, did Jesus exist? Christianity depends or requires Jesus being a real historical figure. A fictional character cannot atone for sin or affect the real world. Think of Sherlock Holmes. The acts of Sherlock Holmes cannot do anything to the real world. But if Christianity is claiming that Jesus has a real action upon our world, then he must be real. Can't be a fictitious story. But a scholarly consensus where even skeptical scholars affirm Jesus existed. Virtually no serious scholar denies his existence. Bart Ehrman says that no serious scholar doubts Jesus existed. Non-Christian sources from the first 100 years after Jesus, roughly, you had Tacitus, who was a Roman historian, talk about Jesus. You had Josephus, who was a Jewish historian, talk about Jesus. Suetonius was a Roman historian. Thallus was a secular historian who is probably the earliest reference predating our Gospels. Pliny the Younger was a governor of Bithynia. And Emperor Trajan, these two were corresponding, where I think it was Pliny the Younger was requesting information about it from Trajan. Trajan responded, and we have that. And then there's additional Jewish and non-canonical sources, such as, things like the Gospel of Thomas. Yeah, they aren't canon, but they're still an early reference to the life of Jesus, even if they're not historically true. And then all of the Gospels, of course. All of the Gospels are independent sources that talk about Jesus being real. Oh, never mind. Here's the non-Christian sources on Jesus. You got Tacitus, Josephus, Suetonius, Thalius, Pliny the Younger, and Emperor Trajan. Additional Jewish and non-canonical references. The minimal facts method. This is the idea that really people like Gary Habermas, Michael Licona, these great men, they use these minimal facts that virtually all scholars agree are facts of history. And so once we put all these facts together, the resurrection seems to be the greatest conclusion of these facts. So, only uses data that are, 1, strongly evidenced, and 2, widely accepted by skeptics. There are 6 minimal facts plus additional historical facts, such as the burial or empty tomb. Minimal fact number 1, Jesus' death. Best attested fact of Jesus' life is his death. The fact that Jesus was killed under Pontius Pilate. There's more than 10 independent New Testament sources that talk about Jesus being killed. And then there's people like Josephus from outside. These other ones, Pliny the Younger and Emperor Trajan, I believe, they talk about Jesus being killed under Pontius Pilate. So there is what is called a criterion of dissimilarity. The fact that Jesus was thought of as the Messiah by the disciples, and then he died and returned. This isn't something that a Jew of that time would have just made up. It wasn't really in the mind of Jews at that time to expect a dying and rising Messiah. So, fact number 1 of history, Jesus died. Fact number 2, the disciples' experience. Can I move this? I'll move you over there. Perfect. The disciples' experience. Resurrection is a supernatural claim. Historians can describe the data, but not adjudicate the miracle itself. The resurrection is beyond the boundaries of a historian. But these facts about these events can be attested. 1 Corinthians 15, 3 through 7 is the earliest creedal reference to the death, burial, and resurrection of Jesus. And Paul is quoting it. He's like, hey, I'm going to pass on to you what I have received. And so he's reaching back to something before him, showing that the message of this creed predated him. Paul didn't just make up Christianity as we know it. Paul's earlier Jerusalem visit was confirmed with Peter and James. He didn't just get converted and then start running around teaching, but he spent years learning and even went to Peter and James to learn more. After 3 years of going off and learning is when he finally went to Peter and James and received more training and probably received this creed within 3 years of his death, or not his death, of his transformation, his conversion. My bad. All right. Minimal facts number 3. The earliest proclamation, or homologia. This is the core of the teaching of Christianity. The earliest core confession, Jesus' deity, death, and resurrection. 19 converging lines of evidence for the earliness of the proclamation. These include the 1 Corinthians 15, 3 through 7, list of appearances to people, the early quote-unquote good news and confession, former creedal traditions as memorized oral units due to widespread illiteracy, Paul's own Damascus Road testimony in 1 Corinthians 9:1 and 15:8, Paul's 2 Jerusalem visits, Galatians 1:18 through 20, Galatians 2:1 through 10, confirming shared gospel content with Peter, James, and John. Number 5, pre-Pauline creedal texts from Romans 5:8, Philippians 2:6 through 11, Colossians 1:15 through 20. Number 6, broader New Testament epistolary material that took place 20 to 30 years after the crucifixion. These are the writings of the New Testament. Number 7, Gospels and Acts, 35 to 65 years post-crucifixion, still early by ancient standards. These are early attestations of history being written down. Multiple sources agreeing on the quote, the third day. Multiple independent sources and literary forms, creedal sermons, didactic, apocalyptic, all of these different genres talk about Jesus raising on the third day. Embarrassing details in the story. Disciples' unbelief beforehand or after the during the crucifixion. Flight, Peter's denial. Women were the first eyewitnesses to the tomb, while the men were off hiding. That's also something that is embarrassing, and a first century Jewish person or Roman wouldn't have made that up as the testimony of a woman was not usually accepted in any type of courts. Discontinuity with Jewish messianic expectations. Again, we're back to it didn't make sense according to their backgrounds. Aramaic phrases suggesting early Palestinian origins. The fact that there are words that were used and quoted from Aramaic show that it made sense of the region in which this story was taking place. Do I have... Yeah, there we go. I apparently have them. Aramaic phrases. Enemy attestation. James, Paul, converted priests. But James and Paul were the big ones. James at one time, it seems, tried to have his brother killed and then became a Christian. Paul was persecuted in the church and became a Christian. Multiply attested group appearances, where he appealed to the 12, he appeared to all the apostles, appeared to 500. These claims. Oh, and one missing is early teaching of Jesus' deity alongside death and resurrection. Scholarly collaboration is Wedderburn, Fuller, Meyer, New Testament, N.T. Wright, my bad. Resurrection proclamation at the very root of the earliest Christian message. All these affirm the resurrection is the central teaching early on. Minimal facts number 4. The disciples' transformations. Before fear, flight, denial, but after the resurrection, bold public proclamations, willing martyrdom. They were willing to be martyred. Of course, we can't get into the mind of these people and say for sure, but what we can see is that if you're stoned, thrown out for dead, and then when you heal up, you go back into that same city to share the same message, you're probably willing to die for it. So transformation does what transformation does and doesn't prove. The transformation of the apostles does not prove the resurrection happened, but it does show sincere belief they saw the risen Jesus. So this does not by itself prove the resurrection occurred. The transformation is strongest when combined with other evidence. We're going to go back a little bit to keep talking about the disciples' transformations. While there are the 14 supporting considerations, multiple independent early sources, canonical, non-canonical, and pagan, embarrassing admissions, preserved disciples, the cost of the movement's credibility, long-lasting transformation, 5 to 25 years to the point of martyrdom, probable martyrs like Peter, Paul, James the son of Zebedee, and James the brother of Jesus. Thomas was more probable than not that he died. We'll talk more about James and them, but Sean McDowell, the son of Josh McDowell, who I'm not even going to explain. Most people know Josh. Sean did his doctoral work on the fate of the apostles. In trying to lay out what history actually says instead of Fox's Book of Traditions, where Sean says that we have the highest probability, historical highest certainty for Peter, Paul, and James the son of Zebedee. And then we go down one step to very probable. is James, the brother of Jesus, as martyrs. And then more probable than not is Thomas. Other than that, it gets less and less likely as we go down the list of apostles and their martyrdom. So transformation alone does not prove that it's the story is true, but it does show they were sincere about what they saw, and the fact that they had a cumulative or collective claim. So, minimal fact number 5, trying to make it through this, the conversion of James. This is my favorite one. The Gospels present James as a skeptic in Mark 3, Mark 6, John 7 through 5, 1 Corinthians 15, 7a. Jesus appeared to James. James becomes a leader of the Jerusalem church, and he died as a martyr. The interesting thing is how James started. Yeah, he started as an insider, but also an enemy. He was a skeptical family member, which is embarrassing to preserve. If you were lying about this story, you wouldn't claim that you didn't believe God, but then later was like, oh yeah, no, now I believe it after I watched you brutally get murdered. So, Fuller's quote, we should have, I don't remember what that quote references to. Fuller's famous line, if there were no record of an appearance to James, we should have to invent one to explain his conversion. The fact that he changed, it's believed that James actively at one point tried to have his brother killed. I don't remember the passage, but it talks about when there was the Festival of Tabernacles. Jesus didn't go down knowing that the Jews wanted to kill him. And it says, the next word, right? The Jews wanted to kill him. So, his brothers said, go down. No one who wants to be seen does things in secret. So they knew that the Jews wanted to kill him, yet they were still pushing him to go. And this same man, we're assuming James was there, but this same brother eventually died for that. And I don't know about you, but James to me is one of the greatest evidence for the resurrection, because the last person I would believe is God is my fellow brother, is my flesh and blood, someone who shares DNA with me. It's the last person I'm going to accept as God. Next is the minimal facts number 6, the conversion of Paul, who was a zealous persecutor of the church, near unanimous scholarly agreement on his genuine experience. Even the skeptical Jesus seminar rated it virtually certain that Paul had some type of experience. Acts 9, 22 and 26, companions witness external phenomenon, light and voices at his conversion, confirmed early by multiple sources. Paul's own letters, Acts, Clement, Ignatius, Polycarp, all of these people talk about Paul's conversion. Highly embarrassing admission, participation in persecution, possibly deaths, such as, and all of Acts 7, 54 through 60 and 22 through 4. Paul's martyrdom under Nero was rated highest possible probability by Sean McDowell in his doctoral work published under The Fate of the Apostles. Paul's education, he was a Pharisee, which means he had Pharisaic training, lends weight to his careful reasoning testimony. He wasn't just unlearned man who saw something and ran, but he was a worthwhile scholar of his time. Alternative naturalistic theories such as visions, illness, psychological states lack supporting data and are addressed at length elsewhere in these books of Gary Habermas that I showed. If you have any further questions, I would highly recommend buying these books, reading them for yourself. They are fantastic. They're lengthy, but it's not a hard read. So, next is the empty tomb and burial. Jesus' burial by Joseph of Arimathea with Nicodemus is well attested, including by a figure not otherwise sympathetic to Jesus' ministry. The fact that Nicodemus is said to be burying him instead of his disciples. The tomb was found empty by women on Sunday morning. Two key evidence: women as first witnesses. This is an embarrassing detail, unlikely to be invented, since women's testimony carried little legal weight at the time. It also implicitly makes the male disciples look fearful. And two, the conversion of James, a family member's radical change of belief. If burial and empty tomb are denied, the resurrection claim cannot be sustained. If affirmed, they anchor the empty tomb leg of the cumulative case. This is a necessary anchor for the resurrection claim. Ties back to James' conversion as corresponding evidence. The fact that James was willing to admit that his brother was God shows that the tomb was empty after Jesus was buried. I read that, Why the empty tomb matters, necessary anchor for the resurrection, ties to James' conversions as it's supposed to be conversion, as corresponding evidence, bringing it together. 6 minimal facts plus empty tomb burial. Multiple independent, early, and even hostile sources converge. A strong cumulative case, not a mathematical proof. Okay. This is, so we take all of these things and we pump them together, right? The six facts of Jesus died, and his disciples had an experience. The gospel, the resurrection, was early on taught. It wasn't 60 years later that the idea of the resurrection happened. It happened within, I would argue, 5 years. I think Paul came to belief in about 2 years after the resurrection. I think it was when his road to Damascus experience happened. So that's 2 years, and then 3 years from the two where he went away. 3 years later, he comes to Jerusalem. So within 5 years, he then receives that early creedal statements. Jesus' death, disciples' experience, early proclamation of the gospel. The disciples all were the transformation of the disciples from being fearful to willing to die. James, the brother of Jesus, converted to be a Christian, and Paul converted to be a Christian. Both of them were hostile towards Jesus' ministry. And additional historical fact, the empty tomb and burial. All of these, I believe, make the most sense only if the resurrection happened. Only if Jesus walked out of that tomb. Only if Thomas put his fingers where the holes were. This is all up to each individual to take these steps on this cumulative case and take that last final step in a verdict, as J. Warner Wallace puts it. And that's where your faith comes in. Lastly, I want to talk about objections. I only have one objection that I like to talk about. This is Hume, David Hume, on are miracles possible? Hume, a miracle is a violation of laws of nature. Laws of nature is established by uniform, unbroken human experiences. Therefore, testimony for a miracle is always less probable than the testimony being a mistake. Move you guys over there, or move me over there. All right. Any testimony for a miracle is less probable than the testimony being a mistake. The conclusion is a wise person should never believe a miracle report. Now I got to move again. Okay. Answering Hume. Alvin Plantinga, I believe this is from his book Where the Conflict Really Lies. Laws of nature describe a closed system. No outside causal input. Every law carries a hidden condition, quote, assuming no outside cause intervenes. When God acts in the world, the system is no longer closed. The law isn't broken. Its boundary conditions no longer applies. An analogy. A hand catching a falling ball doesn't violate gravity. It introduces a new cause the law never ruled out. A miracle isn't broken laws. It's a cause outside the law's built-in assumptions. That is a lot, but the second law of thermodynamics says energy cannot be created or destroyed in a closed system. Well, so the closed system is our universe. When God interacts, because he's outside the system, the universe is opened up, so to speak, and God interacts, and then he's done, and it closed again. So when a miracle is done, no law is truly being broken because the system isn't closed. Again, so Hume he got the fact right that laws cannot be broken or don't get broken by God, but that when God interacts, the system isn't closed, and so the laws have no bearing on these statements. Lastly, Hume, I'm just going to go here. Wham. So, Hume, lastly, made some errors in his way of reasoning this out. His arguments were kind of circular. A lot of people pointed it out. C.S. Lewis famously pointed out how David Hume failed in his approach of this topic. But I would highly recommend that. I believe it's C.S. Lewis's book on miracles is fantastic. Or, like I pointed out, Alvin Plantinga's book, Where the Evidence Really Lies, definitely is a more harder read than C.S. Lewis. So, those are it. Those are the evidence for the resurrection. Is a cumulative case. Now that you have these minimal facts, these 6 minimal facts plus the empty tomb, now you have to make your decision. What best accounts for those facts all being true?